Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Write or Die Show. We are live this week. How exciting is that? I have lipstick on my teeth. How fun is that? But we are live this week, and I'm excited to be able to go live with everybody now. Now it's bugging me. See, oh, it's gone now. It's fine. It's totally fine. That's the problem with going live, though, guys, is that you're going to get it all. Anyways, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you have not already done so, so that you never miss an episode here on the Write or Die Show. Today with us, we have another amazing author.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. I've just, it's a little early here on the West Coast. I just hope there's enough light.
Yeah, I can see you fine. You're good.
Okay, good. Yeah, I can see myself, and I think I look pretty good. So
yeah, you look great. So with us today, we have Duncan MacLeod. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did.
Yes. Perfect. And so first, just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Who is Duncan MacLeod? Well, I could talk about my history. I think kind of one of the key events and then the things that I write about are when I was in boarding school and I suffered some depression. I went there on my own free will. It wasn't like I got thrown away to boarding school. I really wanted to go. And then I was like an Ivy League student at Columbia University, and things really started to kind of come apart. And I decided to leave and go to San Francisco. I had a lot of adventures there. But they culminated with what I later, many years later, discovered was a manic episode. At the time, they called it a psychotic break, and I was hospitalized. So all my writing is about the time before the hospital, the time in the hospital, and then I haven't really written about. Oh, I wrote about time after the hospital when I got involved in drugs, which was a big mistake. And then I had many, many years clean, and I'm still clean. And that's my history. But who I am, I'm an author, a filmmaker, a musician, a son, and it is a hard question, you know. I think all your guests say that.
They do. I told him that this was the hardest question of the whole interview. I'm not lying. It really is. Especially since I never let people get away with like, this is what I do, right? Like I'm always like,
Right.
that's what you do, not who you are. But I always like to know, do you have any pets?
Yes, I have a dog who's kind of asking to be let in right now.
What kind of puppy?
She's like a Cairn Terrier, maybe mixed with a Schnauzer. She's very cute. She has a little mustache, you know. And
what is her name?
Her name is Pepper.
Oh, see, that's the important parts of life.
Yeah.
Is the pets. Like honestly,
Yeah.
I asked the question only to find out about that.
Yeah, I'm a dog owner, so that's another identity I hold.
The most important one.
Yeah, and gay man is another important one. I think I might have left that off.
You did, and I was gonna ask because I see the flag in the back there, and I was gonna be
Yeah.
nosy about it. So.
Yeah, that was to remind me to say something about that. So.
Oh, okay. And you need reminders about telling about who you are?
I'm a forgetful person, so I just
me too.
I help
Me
myself
too.
out.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I guess I'm done answering that question from the point of view of what I've done and whatnot. What I'm doing now is that I'm starting to advocate for mental health awareness. Sometimes we say fighting stigma, and other times I would say teaching people about ableism, which is it's a kind of a new word for me, but I realized that's what I was doing when I heard somebody use it, and I'm like, what is that? You know, ableism is it's like any kind of other ism, like racism, where the abled just assume that everything needs to be for them, and they don't always think about the people who are struggling with ability, you know, in different ways. For me, it's living with bipolar disorder, but for others, it's It can be anything. I actually had a little stint where I broke my ankle and I had to be in a wheelchair. And that's
Oh,
when I became acutely aware of what disability means, because I was in that wheelchair for 6 months and it was hard. I was really lucky that it was only temporary. And for people who don't have an option at some point of getting up and walking, I can only imagine how hard life is and how stressful.
yeah. I saw, oh, there's some comedian. He keeps popping up on my TikTok. I don't find him that funny, but like kind of
Yeah,
sometimes. And he was making a joke. It was actually in a nice way, I feel like, but he was making a joke about um some group of people thinking that their life was so hard, but you know what? I think the guy in the wheelchair has it harder. Or like
right.
just kind of a silly joke, but it was like kind of hits home with that point of, yeah, I think it's pretty tough. I mean, I have been lucky enough to not need that, but I
Yeah.
think it's pretty tough.
It is. Just learning how to open a door. I had to watch YouTube videos about how to open a heavy door because I didn't
Oh,
know. And
wow. Yeah.
I would show up at work and I'd just be waiting for somebody to come open the door for me. So I always showed up. I showed up a little early, and then it was a movie studio, and people just kind of drift in. There's not that many early birds, so sometimes I was sitting outside that door for 15 minutes waiting for someone to show
Wow.
up. And then I learned how to open it. And I thought this door should be open all the time. And I talked about it and they said, yeah, no, it's a fire door and we have to keep it
Oh,
closed.
right.
I'm like, oh, well,
It's something though that I never thought of that. Like I totally just take it for granted that, doors have those little buttons they can just open whatever. But like, yeah, there sometimes that's not the case. And
yeah.
I've never thought about, yeah, what if the door is really heavy?
And it was. And I figured it
Yeah.
out. I watched a video where the guy said, you get to, it's counterintuitive about where you need to be while you're opening it. And then, uh, you just have to pull really hard until it kind of swings to a point where you can grab it like this and then continue to open it. Now,
Huh.
I'm not teaching anyone who's in a wheelchair anything. They know this already. If they've
Yeah.
spent any time, if they've spent their whole lives, they're very aware of it.
They taught you already.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But um, the rest of the people didn't think it was that serious. And also, when you had to go to the bathroom, you need to use that big stall, and
Hmm.
I was guilty of this for years, just sitting in this stall, reading a book or something, and I'd have to clear my throat and say, "Excuse me, I need to use that." It was embarrassing. But that's not my core identity. So we can drift on to other topics.
Yeah, yeah. I just thought that was kind of interesting, especially, there's things that we don't always think about, and that's true for whether it's a wheelchair or other disability or mental health. We don't often think about those other things because we take it for granted that we can do it.
Yeah.
Um, and so, with that being said, we're going to talk about mental health. And so, because I have this fancy new live streaming thing, we're going to start with, see how cute that was when it pops up?
Yes.
So, we're going to start with the
Amazing.
definition, right? What? So we're going to start with the definition here of bipolar. Then we're going to go back to your story because I know that you did not start with this diagnosis. It was kind of a long process.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, this is from the Mayo Clinic. Bipolar disorder, which was formerly called manic depression, is a mental health condition that causes extreme mood swings that include emotional highs, mania or hypomania, and lows for depression. So that's from, again, the Mayo Clinic, but we're going to talk about life experience here. So Duncan, start your story wherever makes the most sense for you. And I know we're going to go back a bit.
Okay. Well, I wrote the book 5150, which is behind me, first, and that starts just a couple of days before everything fell apart in a serious way. Like when I was at Columbia University, I was very anxious, racing thoughts, things like that. But it kind of went away, came and went. But then one day aliens arrived. The phone company was in charge of everything. I went to the library to find a new identity. So I became Gertrude Stein, and she would stay at the Mark Hopkins Hotel at the top of the Mark. and I found a hotel room that was just wide open, and I went in there and I got arrested for trespassing. And I thought those were definitely aliens taking me to their beautiful new planet, and jail was not a beautiful new planet. And I didn't know I was in jail. I thought, oh my God, I shouldn't have never let these aliens take me. That kind of, so you get the idea. And I told the story.
And how old were you?
I was 19.
Okay.
Which is a pretty common age for these things to kind of come to a head.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's later in life, and occasionally it's earlier, but that's, it's right on time. And then I got 5150'd, which is a term we use in California for transfer from jail to the mental hospital. And
okay, that's where that comes from. Because we call it we call it forming. So you've been formed.
Okay, I never knew that word. God, maybe I should rename my book.
Well, I'm in Canada, right? So it's different.
Oh, okay. Everywhere is different. England, it's sectioned. I think also on the East Coast. But yeah, in California, they say 5150 because that's the form that they fill out, the form 5150.
Yeah, we say formed because nobody can ever remember what the name of the form, like which number form it is. So we just say formed.
Yeah, so I got formed to San Francisco General, and I was still under the delusion at that time that this was aliens doing, taking me strange places. I was able to identify the good aliens. For some reason, they had like one eye looking straight forward and one eye that was sort of skyward.
Okay.
And they were very helpful to me, but they weren't, I don't know. I don't think they were aliens now, but at the time it felt like that was the, kind of the overarching theme. I also was able to communicate with people through just writing in my journal, and they would receive the message in my mind. Sometimes they would just show up out of the blue because I'd written to them. So there was like a mystic element to it. And I actually met a psychiatrist who said, yeah, the person who's going through psychosis is drowning in the waters that the mystic can swim in. And that's what was happening. I was, having a spiritual crisis and an emotional crisis and a mental crisis. It was all things that come from our brain and our heart, they were just all mixed up. And by writing that book, which is in the first person present tense, it takes a reader through the psychotic process, the thought process. People who read it say, wow, I started to feel crazy. And then I tell them, well, crazy isn't a very nice word. But
see, I beg to differ. Only because I enjoy calling myself crazy.
Yeah,
Neil,
I get a thrill out of it too.
Right? So I feel like you have to, if somebody tells you, oh, I really don't like when you say that to me. Okay, I respect that. I'm not going to say it to you.
Yeah.
However, I have heard from other people, don't say that word at all. I'm like, but I'm describing myself, and not in a mean way.
Yeah.
I've taken a very long time and a whole lot of therapy to get to where I am now.
Yes.
And if I want to say, I'm a little bit crazy, that's okay. Right? Like, I feel like I can do that to myself. If somebody else doesn't want to, that's their prerogative, and that's fine. And I won't say it to them.
Well, I don't mind it that much. I mean, like I said, when that's not a good word, I wanted them to know that it's like saying queer. My community owns the word queer. And we use it to describe ourselves. We even sometimes use dirtier words, but because we were called them when we were young, and we need to own them, like we need to say, that's who I am as me. In a positive way. So yeah, crazy is, some people say it's a bad word, right? And that's what I told people who say that to me. I just say, be careful when you use the word, because it can offend people.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning of fighting stigma, making awareness of ableism, because that word comes from the abled community to describe us. And yes, it sounds like you've owned it. And talking to you. I felt guilty owning it, but now that you say it that way, you've actually helped me to
Perfect. Oh, I'm so glad. That's what I'm here for.
Okay, so I can say crazy and
Yeah.
feel fine about it. But
Yes,
I'll be aware of
as long as it makes you okay. That's all.
Yeah. And it was a crazy time. The next book is about halfway houses, going from a 3/4 of the way house to a halfway house.
So what is a 3/4 of the way house? I haven't heard that term before.
It was in San Francisco. I imagine with budget cuts, they don't exist anymore, but it's basically a more structured halfway house where there's activities within the house. They don't send you out into the world and say, go to day treatment. They have treatment there.
Okay, so we've been calling those recovery houses.
Yeah. Okay. So that's in San Francisco. It was called a 3/4. I don't even know what it's called in LA because I haven't. Luckily, thank the spirits that I haven't had to return to the hospital since that time. I've been really lucky. I've been high functioning. I got my MBA eventually. I got my bachelor's and my MBA. I learned Italian. I already spoke Spanish and French, and I thought, Italian will be easy, and it was.
I've been trying to learn Spanish.
I'm
using the little Duolingo app. Oh no, not a lick of it. I mean, we had to take it in school, grades 4 to 9. I don't remember a darn word.
Are you in Toronto area or?
No, I'm about 2 hours south of Toronto.
Okay.
I'm much closer to Buffalo than I am to Toronto.
Okay, I know where you are.
I have
friends from Buffalo, so
there you go. Yeah, I'm right across the border.
So that's not a French-speaking part of Canada, so I
no,
you wouldn't. But if you had come from Quebec, you would have had to be bilingual. Well, I'm proud of you for learning Spanish. In LA, I use it all the time. My husband worked as a bilingual operator or customer service rep at AT&T, actually.
Oh, that's neat.
So I learned a lot of Spanish from him, a lot of the colloquialisms, which you don't learn in school. Even when you read books, they're a little more formal. So I didn't know a lot of, and plus LA has its own slang, in Spanish. So we learn a lot of that too. It hasn't, I haven't been able to use it in my books that I write yet, but I did in the book Mexico. I wrote a book about after the halfway house. In real life, a friend took me to Mexico. He showed me how to get on the train and how to be in Mexico and how to speak. He spoke Spanish as a second language, and he was really impressed at how I actually got kind of better than him because he hadn't. But in the book, he's not there. It's just me, and then I meet people along the way who have elements of him. I was very much in love with this guy, but he had a boyfriend, and it was kind of a tragic love affair. So I created a character at the halfway house who was part him and part other men that I didn't get to ever be with but wanted to. And then he vanishes. I don't want to give away the whole book, but so I end up going to Mexico on my own. And that book is probably my favorite. It's so different from the other two because even though
And that's not the one you gave me to review? Oh, how rude. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, 5150 is really about mental health. Mexico is more about, it's a sort of Jack Kerouac on the road type book. And then A Quarter, which is the book after that, is about my descent into heroin addiction. And then briefly about the recovery from that. I probably owe the world a book about recovery, but it was so boring. It was, I got my life together. I mean, there's some things that I could write about. I worked at a phone sex place for a while as a bookkeeper.
Okay. That's not what I was picturing when you said it.
Well, once in a while I would have to get on the phones because they were missing an operator, but not as they called them fantasy makers. I wasn't a fantasy maker. I was just an operator. It was like a dispatcher, right? I would get the call. The guy would say, well, I'm in a tennis dress and I want to be spanked with a tennis racket. And I would just pass that along and say, Ed wants to be spanked with a tennis racket. And the fantasy maker would say, great, I can do that,
Alrighty.
So that was a very strange time. It was before the internet, so it was kind of, there's been replacements for all of that, as you can
There
imagine.
was a time before the internet? What?
Yeah, my entire series is pre-internet, so it's probably fascinating for younger people to read, but for whatever reason, it seems like Gen X and above are the ones who are reading it right now. So
There you go.
it's very punk and it's very, grungy. So it's a little before the times of younger generations.
Yeah.
So they have to be interested in history to read it. It's historical. So
Oh, doesn't that make you feel old?
yeah, but I'm old.
We were we were watching 911 yesterday, and then it finished, and another show popped up, and with like the little blurb, and it was
uh-huh.
like 20 years ago during 9/11. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel old. I remember everything about that day, where I was, what the teachers were saying. I was in grade 9. It was go to the library, watch the like, what? And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I feel old because they're saying, 20 years ago. And it really is history now. I'm like thinking when I was 16, like, so my youngest is 16, thinking, oh, you're so old at 30. And now that I'm in my 30s, I'm like, no, I'm not old, but I get it. Oh my gosh.
Just wait.
No.
It's fun. I mean, you learn a lot as you age. So, and there's even ageism, which I don't address. That's not my particular cause, but I do experience it. It's harder to get a job. Um, your mind slows down a little. Not terribly, but like I'm not the snappy, brilliant person I was when I was younger, and so I don't always like I get sidelined at work sometimes. I go, he's an old fart, or something, and that
Yeah.
hurts, but just means I'm getting paid to do less, which I don't mind. So,
Well, there you go. You got to think of the benefits.
yeah, right now I'm not working at a B job. I decided that 2023 would be the year that I devote all of my time to being an author and to see what I can see if I can make it a full-time job. I definitely work full-time, but I owe myself a lot of money right now, so I'm waiting
Right?
for
And
that
that's the
paycheck.
problem.
Yeah.
That is the problem. Okay. All
Um,
right. So you were getting your life together, or got your life together, and then where did we go from being addicted to getting your life together? And then
I spent, let's see, 7 years of recovery in San Francisco, finishing my bachelor's degree. It was a dual bachelor's degree in film and Italian. And
hmm.
then I worked while I was in college. I worked at the phone sex place, and as soon as I graduated, I got snatched up by the Italian Cultural Institute, which is a branch of the consulate, and it was actually working for the Italian government.
So that sounds like
And
a much better job than the phone place.
well, the phone place was great too. I worked with a lot of like punks that had been in bands and stuff. The band Frightwig, like a few of their members worked there. So I got exposed to a lot of music and stuff. But that's uh, yeah, you're right. The Italian Cultural Institute was way better. I had a radio show for a little while because all these
Oh, cool.
a fellow passed away who was a DJ playing Italian music, and he left his entire collection to the institute. So I said, let's start a
Wow.
radio show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was on the news as an Italian newscaster for the Bay Area at one point, the San Francisco Bay Area. And that was fun, but I was like, I want to go to Hollywood. My film major was calling me, so I moved to LA.
Mm.
I worked for New Line Cinema, but I got into, because I'd been a bookkeeper both at the phone sex place and the Italian Cultural Institute. I fell into accounting, which is as far from the creative side of film as you can get.
Yeah.
And I loved being in, it was actually fun. I got to pay for Marky Mark's prosthetic penis in Boogie Nights. I mean, that's as fun as it gets, though, as an accountant. You're like, oh, or I paid for some synchronized swimmers from Austin Powers, that kind of thing. I wrote checks, but that's not creative. So I moved on to a couple of other jobs while I was here. I did a stint where it was at the early days of the internet, and the third world was struggling to get connected. So we had a satellite. I worked for a satellite company that connected people to the internet via satellite, and not just people, but in ISPs, internet service providers in foreign countries. And I did a lot of travel. So I got to see Latin America, Africa, Central Asia. I went to Georgia, and gave a talk for the UN about connecting. It was like sounds like something that someone who's bipolar would make up, but it really happened. And then I got laid off because of 9/11. Our headquarters were in the World Trade Center, and so they just laid off a whole bunch of salespeople, including me. And that's when I said, I'm going to make a movie. So I made a film about Mexican wrestling, and that I sold it and distributed it. And that was a really fun, exhausting process. I ended up being the producer, the director, the editor, and the writer. And, I did everything. So I said, no more film. Let's write. And I had started that novel 5150 almost the day I moved to LA in 1997. And so I finished it in 2010. It took 13 years, that sounds like. And 13 years to write the first book. And then the second and the third and the fourth were much faster because I knew how to write now.
That's how mine went too. Like the first one took forever. And then I was like, okay, I got this.
I got this. Yeah, exactly. And then luckily CreateSpace came along. That was the Kindle Direct Publishing of its day. And I put out the paperback, and then I did the Kindle through Amazon. And, they have 80% of the book market. So that was enough for me. And then I found Smashwords, which gives you another 10%. It's a platform where you publish your ebook and then they distribute it to Kobo and Barnes and Noble. And they even did Amazon for a while, but they only do that with their super hot selling authors. So but through all that, I learned how to get my books out there, but there's some missing pieces that I'm still learning. The marketing.
Marketing is the hardest part. I just did an interview on somebody else's show before this one, and one of his questions was, what is one of the skills that you need to work on to make your dreams come true? And that was my answer: marketing.
And I studied marketing at USC when I got my MBA, but I was afraid. I didn't know this, but at that time I was living with a lot of stigma. And when you're getting your MBA with all these super high functioning younger kids, I was much older. I was the oldest one in my class. I got just so depressed. I went through a depression cycle, and right when I graduated, and I was afraid to take any job. So I just stayed where I was working at a post-production house, and just drifting and not really taking charge of what I could be doing as an entrepreneur, bookseller. I had my book out, but I wasn't, so I wasn't really doing what I could do as an author to be successful. And I'm still struggling with that because, it's hard.
That sounds like my beginning as well. So when did you finally get your bipolar disorder? What led you to finally get that?
DSM-5. I was with the DSM-3 and then the DSM-4. And I didn't meet the criteria for bipolar because I'd only had one manic episode, and it's supposed to be a cycling thing, but it turned out I wasn't aware of my hypomania. And when the DSM-5 came out, they said, if you've had even one serious manic episode, and you're depressed the rest of the time, which was me, you're bipolar. And then, so it's really just a diagnosis, but it turns out that the medicine for bipolar is much better for me than just antidepressants. So
I think that's the biggest difference, right? Okay, it's just a diagnosis, it's just a label, but that label equals the correct medication.
Exactly. So when I got first lithium, which kind of built up in my system and got toxic, they switched me recently to another medication, and things have gotten so much better. I'm level-headed, happy. I'm actually experiencing a lot of happiness without being afraid that it's going to go into hypomania.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of learning to truly be who I am. I was under being. I wasn't being my full self, and now I'm owning it and talking about it on podcasts and reaching out to the world with my blog and my own podcast, which is a fictional. I mean, it's fiction, so it's just me reading my books, but it's
Oh, okay.
At some point I may go into a format like yours where I talk to other people who
It's
are
very fun.
struggling. Yeah, I can see
Yeah.
you're having a great time, and I
Me
love
too.
being on other people's podcasts and talking. And so maybe at some point I will
Yeah.
take When Everything Cracks, my podcast, and
Oh,
and the
that's what
title of
that's for.
yeah, my new book, When Everything Cracks, is the first two books rewritten in a non-fictional setting where it's Duncan MacLeod going through these things, not Ethan Lloyd, the character I created because I was ashamed.
Yeah.
I'm
I
not.
think that's such a significant point.
Yeah,
Is that it is scary to put your story out there in the world. And I mean, you did in a sense, but you still, were kind of hiding behind this character. And it's not to say that's a bad thing. I have read a few different books where people have done that. And if it works for them at that time, that's great. But if you have the ability to get out there and tell your story in this way, it really puts a face to bipolar or a face to depression or a face to whatever it is, and can make other people who are going through, who are struggling, go, okay, I'm not by myself.
exactly.
This person who I can see, or listen if you're on the podcast too, is really awesome, and they struggle with it too.
Exactly. And that's my primary way of fighting ableism is, or, getting rid of stigma is owning it. And now I'm going to say I'm crazy because you,
It's okay.
owning your craziness and expressing it as a wonderful thing. And I remember when I was at that halfway house, there was a protest because San Francisco was cutting the funds for its most vulnerable citizens, the mentally ill, or the people struggling with mental illness. And I was embarrassed. I didn't want to go down to City Hall and come out as a crazy person. I was afraid. I was terrified. And I owe it to the people that I let down.
You did not let them down. You were just not in a place in your life at that moment to do it. And that is why those people were in that place and were able to do it, so that you could now be in that place now and do
Yes,
it for somebody else.
exactly. It took years. It took
Yep.
30 years for me to get to this place where I'm more than 30 years, 35 years, before I came to the place where I said, oh, this is who I am. This is how I be, my full self, and not under be,
Yeah.
be less than who I am.
Yes, exactly. It can take a very long time. So I'm just glad that you got there.
Me too.
Some people never do.
No.
So I just wanted to go back for a quick sec, because you threw out, DSM-3, DSM-4, DSM-5. I know what you're talking about. But for those who are listening, they might be sitting there going,
What?
okay.
Okay, the
So how
Diagnostic
did that?
Statistical Manual, it's a manual that psychiatrists use to diagnose their patients. It helps them prescribe medicine, not always the right medicine because they don't always get the diagnosis right. But they look at the criteria, and if you meet certain criteria, they either say medicine won't help, primarily for personality disorders. They used to say that, but now they're finding that some can be treated with certain kinds of medicine. And it gets you SSI. I got SSI for a while, which is social supplemental security income. It was a terribly small amount of money, but it was enough to not have to work and to get through college. Although I did work secretly under the table. And I hope, they're not going to come after me at this point, but
Yeah, don't you guys have actual tax jail?
yeah, I guess so.
We don't have tax jail in Canada.
Oh, that's nice. I should move there and not pay my taxes. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, no,
Um,
they still want you to pay your taxes. They just don't send you to jail because if you're in jail, you can't pay them back.
right, exactly. That's a good point, and I wish they would get that here. But I'm not avoiding taxes. I'm paying them. There was a time when I was, in a poverty mentality and afraid to pay my taxes because I thought I would then, not be able to pay rent, which was true. But now I'm in a place where, I'm more financially secure. I have savings and I have ways of paying my taxes when I'm not earning a lot. So and I can set aside money for taxes. I'm a responsible adult. So,
Oh, adulting.
so that's, yeah. And I think that a lot of people who are living with mental illness or, struggling with their mental health are afraid to pay taxes, but that's how you get to move forward in life. You can't buy a house if you're not paying taxes. You can't,
Right.
you can't apply for loans. Sometimes I was able to get a student loan even with my kind of silly situation. And that's when I went to Italy and learned how to be an Italian for a little while. I went there for
Oh.
3 months and lived that great life. They have such a better life than we do.
I
In
went
the
there for
US.
a week.
So
It's not
how
quite the
happy they are.
same. Oh, it
Well,
was so awesome. The food was
yeah,
so good too.
the food and just the level of happiness is so high because they don't take things as seriously as we
Yeah,
do.
there's a lot less. I don't want to say less stress, because I don't know their lives, but there's just a lot less bickering. It seemed like here it seems like people find a reason to argue just for the sake of arguing.
Yeah, or just to put another part of the population down to make themselves feel
Right?
better. But in Italy, they feel good already.
Yeah.
I felt I was in Paris before I went to Italy, and because I spoke French, and I was
Oh.
miserable while I was there. I was like, I hate this place. And as soon as I got on the train, sorry Parisians, but as soon as I got on the train at Gare de Lyon to go south to Italy, the mood was like this much higher because there were so many Italians on the train, and then when I
Oh,
got to
wow.
Italy, I was like, oh my God, I like bent down and kissed the ground. I was so happy.
Wow, that's crazy. That is so crazy.
Yeah.
So okay, and then the other thing that I wanted to touch base on, because I just noticed the time. I
Yeah.
can talk forever. But yeah, so I lost my train of thought. So when we're talking about medication,
Hmm.
because this is always a hot button topic for people.
Yes.
I believe if it works for you, take it. I take my antidepressants every day. When I don't take them, it's not good.
No.
But first you talked about lithium, and lithium is the one that I had known about before. So I actually, when I was in college, I actually did my co-op in a drug and alcohol recovery house.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it was so cool. And so part of it was, distributing medications because obviously they couldn't take it for themselves. Not that they couldn't take it for themselves, like they couldn't have the bottle themselves. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyways. Anyways, and so the one person who had bipolar, it was lithium. So that was kind of the one that I knew about. So when you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, I know that. I didn't realize, and obviously, so this is 10 years ago. So things change a lot and they come
Yeah.
out with new types of medication. So I find it really interesting that just because I knew something that happened over 10 years ago, I was like, yeah, that they have that. But
Yeah.
in my head, I'm not realizing other things.
Yeah. Lamictal is the one I take. I don't think I should be ashamed to say Lamictal
No.
or Lamotrigine. I think I don't know which one's the brand name, so I'm going to give both. I think Lamictal is the generic that you would know in Canada what it's called. I think, and it addresses depression much more than mania, which is what I needed because I'm not really as manic as I was at that point at 19. I'm nowhere near. And the problem I had with lithium was that it built up in my system, and I thought I was just getting old and that my life was going to be horrible because my back hurt so badly. I couldn't turn over in bed. I had tremors. I thought, oh, well, I'm just getting old. No, it was lithium. As soon as I got off the lithium, everything got better. So, and that's how I was able to have this year of being an author that I've given myself as a gift.
That is awesome. So yeah, for anyone who is struggling with, should I take medication, or I've already tried it, it didn't work. Sometimes it takes time to find what does.
Exactly. It takes time, especially antidepressants take about a month before you're like, oh, the lead shoes are gone. And then it also isn't always the right medication. And you need to talk to your doctor and say, I'm having these issues. Is there anything else I can take that wouldn't give me these issues? And psychiatrists listen, that's their job. So if they don't, you need to find a new psychiatrist.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So I lucked out. I got a really good one, and she did right by me by moving me off of lithium.
Oh, good. I just got lucky the first one worked. We had to play with the dosage.
Yep.
but we found the right medication
good.
Right away. Just the dosage we had to play with. So I got lucky that way.
That's good.
So before we move on, I always like to say, what is a piece of wisdom that you would tell somebody who is struggling right now that maybe they're like, oh, I think I might have bipolar because I have, that manic and then the depression.
Racing thoughts and sadness, mood lability where you're laughing and then crying, all of those things. I cry easily, so just warning. I should have said it at the beginning. I almost cried at one point, but okay.
I saw that. Yeah, I kind of jumped in.
Yeah, thank you. Because it's a little uncomfortable for me. I don't want to be crying. Wisdom for someone who's struggling and thinks they might have bipolar or depression. Trust that the mental health system where you are is trying to help you. They really are. When someone reaches out when you're at the bottom of a well, which was common for me with depression, and just grab their hand, and let them lift you up. That's my wisdom.
I like that. That's some good wisdom. So you have mentioned your books throughout here. So where do we get a hold of them?
You can get them as ebooks on almost any platform. Look for my name and then type 5150 after it, because Van Halen has an album called 5150, which gets in the way. And my name is the name of the Highlander on the television show Highlander. So all these dolls and other things come up if you just type my name. So type Duncan MacLeod, MacLeod, 5150, and I will pop up on every book site imaginable, even the library sometimes. So
nice. Yeah, I used to hate my mom for giving me my name, but now I'm like, nobody else has it.
Nobody else has it. You should be very proud. Up until about 1992, nobody else had my name either, and then suddenly I went almost invisible because everything was the Highlander. So
yeah.
People go, really? When I say my name, I go, yeah.
And what is the name of your podcast again?
It's called, and I will move it into screen, When Everything Cracks. You can find that by typing When Everything Cracks, Duncan MacLeod, or Duncan even, as simple as that. Because there are other podcasts that use the word crack that are more popular. So you just have, sometimes you have to give them a little extra and they find you. I'm on almost every platform because I'm using a syndicated platform called Libsyn that distributes to a lot of different, Apple and Spotify and then I'm doing it on YouTube as well, which is really hard. but I've managed to get it onto YouTube with kind of a reel that plays while I'm talking.
There you go. Yeah. I like that. Excellent. So everybody make sure that you pick up his books. Make sure you but subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Yes.
And follow on podcasts wherever it is that you listen. And where do we follow you other than on your podcast?
I am 5150 Duncan Mac on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. I think I am just Duncan Mac. Because I got my Twitter handle right when Twitter came out. There was already a Highlander fan taking my name, but Duncan Mac was available. And then, Instagram and Facebook came along later and it wasn't. So 5150 Duncan Mac, or on Twitter, it's just Duncan Mac.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor to speak to someone who's so specifically covering what I want to talk about.
So glad.
Yeah, it's awesome. I watched some of your other shows and I love them. So I'm going to be
And you subscribe
subscribing.
to the channel?
Yeah, I think I already am, but I will make sure. I'm going to go double check after this.
Of course. So thank you everybody for joining us again here on the Write or Die Show. Remember, every Wednesday we have a new episode that comes out. If you haven't already hit the like and subscribe button, I don't know why you haven't, but go and do that. And be sure to check out our merch store. 10% of the proceeds goes back to the Canadian Mental Health Association. And check out the other shows that we have going on. So we just started the new show on Tuesday, Our Neurodiverse World. There's only 2 episodes because it's brand new, but go and check it out. As well, we have Reader's Intrigue that comes out every other Sunday, and What I'm Reading that comes out on Friday for some book reviews. And I will be reviewing Duncan's book 5150 when it comes up on my to be read list. It's coming up pretty soon though, so be sure to check all of those out. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye.